Hello, everybody. Megan here, the Healing Foods Coach, also known to many of you as the Faithful Fibromyalgia Warrior. I hope you're doing well on this amazing, incredible Friday, August the 23rd. Wow, time is going by quickly already, guys. My birthday is next week. I will be 52. I have never felt better, more energy, more healing, more strength, more endurance than I've ever felt my entire life. And I thank God because He brought me to carnivore, which is how I've healed. Truly. He is the great creator. Meat is the medicine. He is the physician. Absolutely. I believe that. So, welcome. Thank you for coming back to my channel. I hope you are doing well today. So, the topic I wanted to jump into today is all about intolerances and allergies and histamines. What is that all about? Well, some of you have asked, and so I will do my best here to explain this in non-science terms, just everyday language, okay? What does it mean? What's it all about? I think everyone here has heard of allergies, of course, in this day and age, and that can be both environmental to things like pollen, dust, mold, mildew. Some people have an allergy to pet fur, whether it's cats or dogs, or other animals, rodents. Whether it's hamsters, gerbils, guinea pigs, etc. That's one kind of allergy. And as you know, if you suffer, you can have anything from watery eyes, runny nose, incessant sneezing. You could also develop red, puffy eyes. You can also develop itchiness. You could also develop wheezing. For some people, it flares an asthma response when we're talking environmental allergies as well. It can also cause you to break out in a rash. So that is an allergy. Your body clearly sees the cells from these items, the cells from these different things, be it pollen, dust, mold, pet fur. Smoke is another one. Your body reacts in a way that produces this effect, and therefore you have an allergy response. It's, for many people, it is not a fatal or anaphylactic response to environmental factors. However, it is highly irritating, very annoying, and extremely uncomfortable. And so throughout the summer season, many people who suffer with seasonal pollen allergies in particular go and take, what is it? An antihistamine. When you have an allergic type response to something, your body produces histamines. It's a result of the body thinking it's being attacked by a foreign substance that it must get rid of. Now, these things are foreign to the body. However, not everybody has a histamine response. Well, the same thing can happen with what we eat. And of course, I'm sure everyone is familiar with the near fatal anaphylactic responses to typical foods like peanuts or other nuts. Eggs is quite common. Shellfish is a particular one that happens to many people. Eggs and milk or dairy products. Those can have an anaphylactic reaction, a severe allergic reaction to those particular items. The same thing can happen to people if they're allergic to penicillin. They could also be perhaps allergic to almost anything, but those are kind of the more common food items that can cause a near fatal response or an anaphylactic reaction. And if you're not sure what that looks like, not only does your breathing become much more difficult, the mouth, the lips swell, the tongue swells, you can no longer get breath in, you can't swallow properly. And if you don't get a shot of epinephrine immediately before being rushed to hospital, you could die. People who have this also tend to have parts of their body swell up. They also tend to break out in a set of rash called hives. It can be a very scary thing. Now, there are people who have this response to things like bee stings or wasp bites. Those can be those can produce an anaphylactic response in some people. But the food ones are probably the ones we're most familiar with because there's more likelihood of what we would call cross-contamination. So if you have an anaphylactic allergy to nuts or eggs, milk, shellfish, then you need to know that what you are eating has been nowhere near any of the items that you have a deathly allergic response to. Okay, which is why you need to know, are nuts used even in the same building? Was a worktop in the factory that made the cookies or the cakes or the cereal? Was that worktop ever at any time ever used for, say, making foods that don't contain nuts, right? Because for some people, even just the mere hint of that particular item will cause a severe reaction. All right, so that's allergies. And we pretty much all know whether we have an allergy to something or not, because it's something that usually appears in life when we're quite young. Okay, and so we therefore have a strong reaction, whether it's an anaphylactic type reaction or just a serious allergic reaction. We may or may not need an EpiPen. We will most definitely need to get some sort of medical, support, because we could break out in hives, we could have wheezing, all kinds of other factors could be true, even if we don't technically fall into the anaphylactic area. So we are pretty familiar in this day and age with people having severe allergies to nuts, shellfish and seafood, dairy, and eggs. Okay, are quite common. So what are intolerances, or what are histamine-like responses for things that we don't have a full, true, tested allergic response to? Well, that can happen with almost everything that we eat, okay? And some of us have sensitivities to certain types of food, certain groups that wouldn't go under as being a classic allergy response, but we don't tolerate them. So, for example, I have lactose intolerance. Will I break out in hives? Will I have my lips go blue? Will my tongue swell up if I consume milk or have dairy products? No. So I don't have an actual allergy, in the medical sense. However, when I do consume milk or dairy products, that being anything outside of butter, I get bloated. I have abdominal distension. I feel gassy. My constipation is worse, and I feel nauseated. Some people who have a lactose intolerance get bloated and gassy and have diarrhea. Are they suffering from a true allergy? No, but they have an intolerance. The same can be said of the difference between, for example, somebody who has celiac disease, where they have an allergic type response to gluten. That would be an allergy. However, many people are gluten intolerant or have a sensitivity to gluten without actually meeting the requirements that would say that they have celiac disease or a gluten allergy. And it is possible to have an intolerance to something without being fully allergic to it. Now, this can also happen, of course, with carnivore food items. Well, shellfish and seafood are carnivore. And while some people have an actual true allergy and have to absolutely avoid them at all costs, some of us have a sensitivity. And why that is for some of us and not others, that I don't know. For example, I personally don't even like fish, but more to the point, it often makes the roof of my mouth feel kind of itchy. I don't break out in hives. It doesn't cause me to be gassy necessarily, but I don't enjoy it, and it makes me feel kind of unwell. It gives me a headache. Not sure. There are some people who say that they are allergic to poultry, whether it's duck or chicken or turkey or goose. And of course, that's possible. We can potentially have an allergy to anything that our bodies decide we can't have this. And so I don't hear that very often, but it is a possibility. The other thing, when we're talking now about poultry, some people have a harder time with digesting pork, especially the lean cuts, okay? Not necessarily bacon, that's a separate discussion, but definitely with certain cuts of pork. Why is that? Perhaps it could be by the time they get it from the grocery store and they get it home, or they get it maybe pre-seasoned at the butcher's and they take it home, they could in fact possibly not be responding to the pork itself. It could be whatever spices or seasonings have been used before it was packaged. They could actually be having a sensitivity or an issue to that. Now, there are some people who just don't feel as well when they're eating such lean cuts of meat, and that is a possibility. Okay, that can happen. When I'm referring to histamine response, I'm referring to what happens physically to the body when we've eaten something. Now, let me go back and say that when we eat pork and poultry, these are animals that have a single stomach system, similar to us as humans. And so when they're eating the grasses and the cereals and the grains as they're supposed to, that's what they're meant to eat, they cannot 100% break down all of the cellulose of the plant material fully and digest it into proteins and fats. So what that means is some of what they've eaten, a lot of it being corn and soybeans, ends up, when it's partially digested and broken down, the result of that is it is stored in their bodies. And so when we then eat their muscle meat and some of their fat later, not a lot, they tend to be leaner cuts of meat, some of what they've eaten remains, and therefore we eat it. So we're not actually eating corn like you would corn on the cob, but whatever they don't fully break down from the corn ends up in their system, which we then eat later. And if we have a sensitivity to grains and cereals, to nuts and legumes and pulses, as I do, as many people do, then we can have what is sort of like what we call a histamine response to eating even pork or poultry. Why? Because unlike our animals like the beef and lamb and cattle of any, well, beef, lamb, and any of the other animals like them who have multi-stomach systems, who are able to completely, fully break down all of the plant material cellulose and convert that into muscle protein and fat, we do not feel the same reaction. It's easier for us to digest. So if you're eating a lot of chicken, and if you're eating a lot of duck, and you're eating a lot of turkey, and you're eating a lot of pork loin or lean cuts of pork chops, or you trim the fat off them. If you're not eating things like pork belly or ribs, which have a lot less, which have more fat, you're getting a lot of the lean meat, which is where some of the plant material that they've not fully broken down ends up getting stored. And it can affect us, those of us who are super, super sensitive. How do we know? Well, if, for example, if you've suffered with swelling or joint pain before carnivore, and you went carnivore, and you've cleaned out all the other stuff that was causing you problems, but let's say you're still eating a lot of lean pork, or you're eating a lot of lean cuts of poultry, you may, if you are still noticing that after you eat, that you still feel a bit of achiness, or a bit of, feels like things are still a bit stiff and swollen, or you're having a bit of achiness, you could, I'm not saying that's necessarily the case, but you may actually be having a slight histamine response to those types of protein. Doesn't affect everybody. Some of us have such sensitive systems, and we have been so sick and so inflamed for so long that even a tiny bit of black pepper can cause us harm. The teeniest little bit of adding barbecue sauce, because of all the seasonings and the spices, can actually tell our bodies, hey, I don't know if I like this, and therefore I'm going to make you feel maybe slightly achy. I'm going to make you feel not 100%, not at your absolute best. That could be why. And sometimes we can only learn these things about ourselves through complete elimination of other stuff. That's what I had to do. I had to get out. I had to take all the sauces. I can have mayonnaise now and again. It's pretty clean. I can have that. That's fine. But I cannot have barbecue or other types of sauces. I can't do any seasonings or spices. I can't do herbs. I don't do any plants of any kind at all. No vinegar, no soy sauce, no Worcester sauce, none of it. Because I don't like it? No, because I react to it in just even subtle ways. Okay. There are certain things that we will have that we know clearly we can't do because we have an immediate massive reaction. So, for example, there are many people who are more keto or ketovore who will include garlic and onion in their diet. I cannot have any of that, absolutely none of it. Even the tiniest bit of cooked onion wrecks me. I am in agony for the next 24 to 48 hours. Just a little bit of cooked up onion. Can't have it. Other people, doesn't bother them. That's how sensitive my gut is, especially struggling as I have with irritable bowel syndrome. So anything that is non-starchy, well, any plant in general doesn't do me any favors, but the non-starchy, low-carb ones like broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, tomato, onions, and garlic, absolute no-nos. Cannot have them whatsoever. Not even a tiny hint. In fact, I have what I would consider to be a mild allergy to garlic. It does not put me in a state of anaphylactic shock, thankfully, but even the smell of garlic, if I'm in a house where somebody is cooking with garlic, it makes the roof of my mouth itch. It makes me start to have an itchy patch on each forearm, and I develop a massive headache within seconds. So to me, that's a sign I really can't have garlic at all of any kind, like period. And so, okay, fine, those are the plants and that can affect us. But even certain people cannot have certain types of meat. I know if you go to her channel, if you watch Rebecca Heischman, she will talk about how she did, when she first started carnivore, she tried doing all kinds of steak and she felt worse. So she had to stop and restart it several times. And then she found that if she did bison, if she did goat, if she did other types of red meat, she felt much better. And the reason what she figured out was that the issue wasn't so much the red meat of the steak. The issue was these were aged steaks, okay, which is a secondary process. So if you get your meats fresh from the butcher, they're not aged. You should not have issues, okay? Once a steak is aged, it goes through an aging process. There are other chemicals and there are other seasonings that are involved to age a steak, to preserve it, to give it that extra flavor for that amount of time. And if you are somebody who is hypersensitive to seasonings and spices and that type of process, it's not that you've cured or smoked the steak, you've aged it, but it does go through a certain process. And in doing that, you've introduced something outside of the fresh cut red meat, and it's that extra bit that seems to cause people the issues. So it's not the meat itself that is necessarily the problem. It is, in fact, what's done to it to age it or to season it, to cure it or smoke it. So most people, in fact, can have bacon, which is basically pork belly that's been thinly sliced and cured. That's essentially what it is. Okay. And different manufacturers, different producers cure their bacon slightly differently. Some of them use loads of ingredients and spices and additives to reach that delightful flavoring. But keep in mind, there's a lot of additives and seasonings, and there's a large process involved to smoke and cure bacon for our consumption. So if you struggle with tolerating seasonings and spices, may not be that it's the pork itself causing you issues. It may be the fact that what's done to the pork in order to make bacon is what's causing the problem. When meats are cured and they're smoked, there's a whole other host of chemicals and cooking, well, not really cooking, but processes that get involved in order to preserve the meat as best as possible to get to that state. So it is a processed meat. I'm not talking simply just lunch meat like deli meats. That's one thing altogether. But there are different additives, flavorings, preservatives, and chemicals involved in order to smoke and cure the meats to last as long as possible. And many people can eat them, enjoy them, and have no issues with them. But if you have a very sensitive system, if your gut is highly sensitive, particularly if you suffer with IBD or IBS, you may also be suffering with Crohn's or colitis, or any sort of gut dysregulation or gut dysfunction, then you will probably want to stay completely away from cured, smoked, and processed meats. Why? Because it is likely the chemicals in them that are causing your body to respond the way that it is. Whether that means you are developing like itchy patches on your skin. You may not have a rash, it may just feel itchy. Okay. You may have a rash. For some people, it involves feeling like there's an itch on the roof of their mouth, or that they have issues with their gut. They're gassy and bloated. They're either having diarrhea or constipation, or a flux between the two. None of it is fun. Okay, and so when I'm talking a histamine response, I'm referring to those things we can eat that we don't have an actual diagnosed and tested allergy to, but that we clearly have issues with, that our bodies do not like and cannot seem to tolerate. So you may have to try, if you still love bacon and you aren't sure you want to get, for example, try to find it with the least amount of added ingredients possible, make it as clean as possible. That might help. You may also, if you have a local butcher's, see if you can get pork belly, but ask them to thinly slice it. That way, you're essentially having pre-cut pork belly slices as bacon, which is where bacon comes from, without the curing process, without the smoking process. Okay, and that in fact, maybe all you need to do is get those added extra bits of chemicals and flavors and everything else removed. The reason I wanted to share this is because it is true that animal sources of protein in general, especially when they're fresh sources, are in my experience, the most non-inflammatory food sources that are out there. Okay. With the understanding of, as long as you don't have an allergy, such as shellfish, seafood, milk, and dairy products, or eggs. If you have no actual allergies, then you can enjoy a wide range of options. And if you do have allergies, okay, you know what you need to avoid. I also wanted to go on to this topic a little bit today, because one thing I've come to understand is that a lot of our intolerances with one food can sometimes be seen in other foods as well. So it is not unusual for somebody who is lactose intolerant to be able to not tolerate egg whites very well. But often we're okay with just the yolks, but the whites, for whatever reason, seem to also cause issues. Somebody with an intolerance to milk and dairy products will probably have an intolerance to egg whites, and will likely have an intolerance with fish and seafood, because those sort of seem to travel together as groups. That doesn't mean just because you have an intolerance to dairy that you have an intolerance to egg whites and these other items. However, it does happen, and in fact, it's fairly common. So just wanted to let you guys know that it can happen, that yes, some people have said that, and I'm one of them, that I have an intolerance, or I can eat a little bit of steak if it's not aged. If the steak has been aged, it's the aging process that causes me a reaction, not the red meat. It's not the meat itself, it's what's being done to it. Okay. But there are some people who have found, and perhaps all you have access to is aged meat as far as a steak is concerned. In that case, you may want to consider ground beef. Ground beef is very non-inflammatory, very filling, fairly cheap. You can find it everywhere. And I would suggest to you that what you will probably find is that, because if you get your ground beef where it's at least 15% fat or higher, you're also getting a lot more of the dietary fat with that ground up protein. And therefore, it isn't the carnivore diet that is causing you a reaction. It is not red meat on its own that is causing you the reaction. It's whatever's being done to the meats you're having that may be causing the response. And that just because you have an intolerance to one thing, I hope that means that you will at least try something different. I don't tolerate fish. I don't do well with seafood. I don't do well with egg whites. That's okay. And I have discovered, in spite of my love of it, I do not tolerate store-bought smoked bacon. I love how it tastes, but it is a trigger for me for my IBS, and it causes my rosacea to flare up. So I guess what I'm wanting to say is that we can all potentially have a histamine response to a lot of different things. Unfortunately, that's just how it goes. But don't just throw out carnivore as a whole if you felt like you felt worse because you had one of those, a 21-day aged Angus steak and it didn't sit well with you, or you went and had some seafood and you didn't feel good after. It may be that you have an intolerance to some of it. And again, it's not the steak that would be the issue, in my experience anyways, unless you've been actually tested and declared to have an allergy to red meat, which would be very unusual. Not impossible. I accept that. Not impossible, but unusual. My guess would be is that it isn't the meat itself. It is what was done to it to age it or to smoke it or to cure it. And those are the things we have to be careful of. But that if we're eating good, fresh meat to the best of our ability, as much as we possibly can, that's going to be the best thing for us. And I would also just remind you guys that we all typically have a higher response to pork and poultry in general, because what they do eat, they do not break down effectively, because they only have a single stomach system. And so unlike cows, unlike bison, unlike lamb and sheep, well, lamb and sheep, same thing. Unlike lamb, unlike, cows and bison, who can fully and completely break down the cellulose of the plants they eat, chickens, ducks, turkeys, they can't. Nor can fish or the seafood creatures we eat. So if you seem to be struggling with some intolerances or histamine reactions, that might be why. And you may want to then go and just try to tidy that up a little bit. Okay. Try taking those things out, see how you feel. And hopefully, if that's what it is, then you'll be able to find other things that can nourish you and avoid the things that cause a response. Sometimes it's hard to tell, especially when we're first healing, because we've had so much inflammation and so much that we've had to get out of our systems for such a long time. It can be hard to work out what is a histamine response. What is my body just trying? What is my body trying to just get this out of itself and heal versus what is an actual reaction to something? So it may take a little bit of patience, of course, as well as just some trial and error. But it is possible. And so I say that because whatever we decide to eat, whatever we find that is nourishing, that does not cause a histamine reaction, that does fuel us, is incredible and amazing and delicious and heals us. And so I hope for those of you who are just really considering trying an animal-based diet, please don't let this keep you from trying carnivore or even just keto or low carb, because overall your health is going to be so much better if you get rid of the processed junk, if you get rid of all the refined sugars and the seed oils and the other garbage that's in your diet, and you cut that stuff out. When you start replacing it with good, healthy animal meats and fats, you are going to start to feel better. And then you kind of tweak from there. You may have histamine responses to things that you simply just hadn't noticed before, that maybe you've always had, but due to inflammation from everything else, you never really noticed it. And that happens too. And again, it's just trying to, little by little, taking out whatever you need to for a time and see how you feel. And hopefully that will help you out loads. So thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the video end. I know it's a longer one today, but I was feeling inspired and I wanted to just share this topic with you guys because I thought that I should have been able to enjoy all those things when I didn't. And so if you're having issues with certain groups of animal proteins, could simply be that you have a very sensitive system like I do, and you just may need to eliminate a few more items for now. You may be able to reach a point in the future where you can introduce some things back in. Hopefully you get enough healing that you can do that. Okay, it may just be temporary, but try doing that, see if it helps. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate all of your support, your love, your kindness, your good words, and as always, your comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video today. Precious time out of your day to watch my videos. I really do appreciate it. You guys are the best. I thank you all for supporting me and subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next video. I should have some content for you tomorrow. Bye for now. Love you all, and thanks for watching. Take care.